Hey guys, thank you for joining me today. We're actually going to review a franchise that I started to review on my very first video. Today, we're going to talk about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Now, interestingly enough, this is actually the 200th video. So that's something we're going to celebrate today. And now I know, this count is taken into account the shorts, some of them being 15 seconds, so it's not the 200th review per se. However, it is a 200 video for the channel, which is something I'm proud of. This started off as something experimental, something to sort of help eye contact, my speech, social skills, as using that as a loose term. So this was sort of experimental to sort of expand those ideas that I had, and this has actually become a hobby, and so it's turned into something that I can turn to share my love, not only for movies, and share my disinterest in certain ones. But for this video, this is a movie I absolutely loved. Like the first one, I thought there was amazing character development. There was so much world building to it. So let's sort of dive into it. All I can say to start off is comparing to the first one. Similarly, it has that iconic theme in the opening, with the opening credits, where the music is just perfect in this movie, just like in the last one. The music sort of really sets the tone, and it sets the vibe, and it sets the feels for what this world of Star Trek really is, and what it's like. And I'm so glad they had a similar scene that the first one included, where the Starship Enterprise is backing up, ready to take off. There's just this iconic music scene for the last couple minutes showing this. And it just feels like a cinematic showcase. And just seeing, as you're just watching in awe of the starship and the music, it just feels legendary. It feels iconic. And I know that's sort of a bit on the nose for someone who's so new to this franchise, but I can see it. I understand so easily how this franchise has been so beloved for so long. I see where it started. I know there are plenty of TV shows that's probably going to take me a while to get through, but I do want to get to the movies because I'm just more of a movie guy than TV, and that's just the truth. And so as I go through these movies, I can see, just like in the first one, in this one as well, why everyone loves this franchise. So let's sort of dig into the story. This movie has a revenge story. That's what the villain is. It's a revenge story, and it was done so well. I thought that it didn't have to rely on these big thematic battles. Even though there were some battles, this movie really relied on the acting for the character of Khan, and the actor did such a phenomenal job. It's rare that I'll get goosebumps watching a villain do his thing on screen, and I had that for this movie, and it was really cool to see. I love a villain that can make you feel the intensity and the emotions that the characters are. And so that was a very strong highlight for me for this movie, is Khan's portrayal, his script, the costume design, just everything about it just felt thematic. And so that's something I really enjoyed. And so for its main opening, I would say about first 20-30 minutes, it's world building. And it doesn't take very long to get into the story. The world building is done in a way where it sort of progresses the characters while showcasing what this world has to offer. So Captain Kirk is now Admiral Kirk, and so he doesn't go on the space explorations anymore like we saw in the first one. That's the role for Spock. He's now Captain Spock of the Starship Enterprise, and he keeps continually having trainees on there as he's trying to train new pilots. And so we sort of get this interesting scene where Captain Kirk sort of is forced to, or Admiral Kirk at this point, he sort of reflects on, he's feeling old. He feels like he's missed out on things. He feels that he's too old to do the whole space exploration thing. That's why it's for the young. And so he's really, honestly, he's having a midlife crisis. That's the most comparable term I can think of for what he's going through at this time in the movie. And so as he's sent for an inspection of the Enterprise, of course, while he's inspecting the ship, they get a message. They have to go investigate, and now these trainees are now thrown into this dangerous scenario, and Spock and Kirk team up. Spock is the captain of the Enterprise, but they sort of have this great respect for each other, where Spock is essentially giving him command of the Enterprise as they're investigating what's ultimately, as we've seen at this point, going to be Khan. And so it's interesting because there are so many different elements to it. We have Kirk having sort of that his own self-thoughts about his worth, and we have Spock, he's just the good guy in this movie. He's the likable character. He's the one respecting the others. He's the one looking out for his own. He really is one of the best parts of this movie, and I think that's sort of why he's such an iconic character. There's so many people that, if they don't watch the Star Trek movies, they've heard of the character Spock, and this movie shows why that is. And as Khan sort of reveals himself to the enemy, he's taken two pilots prisoner, basically, and he's taking control of a ship. He's been marooned for a long time, and that's because of Kirk. And Kirk it sounds like he didn't exactly do the right thing, even though he did what was essentially the best decision at the time. So it becomes this complicated story where it's not just one or the other. There is no good or bad guys. It's both sides doing the best they can with the circumstances given. And so it sort of creates that new dynamic for the movie where it's just more interesting. It makes the characters more engaging. It feels more personal as well. And so as Khan now has command of the starship, he's going to war against the Enterprise after he reveals himself in this iconic way of, just revealing himself on the screen. And Kirk is sort of taken aback, and as the Enterprise is being attacked, they go in details of how they manage their defenses, and this is the part that I find really interesting. Take Star Wars, for example. Outside of the Millennium Falcon, most ships, we only see the inside from the cockpit, and we don't see much. In the Star Trek Enterprise, granted, it is a much larger ship, but if you look at the background, you see so many different wall panels. Everyone sort of has their station on the Enterprise, but there are wall panels that there is no one stationed at, with screens and buttons, and they all have something different, and the buttons have lights, and it's flickering, and it just, in my opinion, encases the whole details in the ship. There was so much details that went into the inside of the Enterprise when this movie was filmed, and so just the incredible attention to detail is something I just can't help but respect and appreciate. And so, with all of that being said, Spock and Kirk now have decided that they are going to do this really sneaky move where they're going to turn the shields down of the enemy ship. And this allows them to get away. And at this point, the whole plot where it's moving toward is there's a space station where Project Genesis, ultimately, as we find out, can create life from a barren world. And so, of course, they want to do their science thing with it and find some barren planet. Of course, some of the crew of the Enterprise suggest what that kind of power would look like in the wrong hands. Of course, Khan wants it for himself. And so everyone's sort of trying to get this Project Genesis. It's what everyone's going after. And so ultimately, this movie does a really cool thing with thinking that Khan has the upper hand, and then it turns out Spock and Kirk know how to maneuver the ship and they get away. So the next phase of the movie, I would say, is they end up tricking Kirk and a couple others, end up being marooned on this new moon, basically, where Project Genesis is. And we think that they're just left behind. And so, as they're sort of discovering that Kirk indeed has a son, as the characters are sort of trying to connect, Spock then reaches out to Kirk, and we now know they saw right through Khan's trap, his trick. The pilots, for lack of a better term, that he had mind controlled, basically. Spock and Kirk spotted them a mile away. So even though those two pilots betrayed the crew, it didn't screw them over. Kirk and Spock are still very much in control. And so as they're beamed back to the ship, they're ready to finally go on the offensive and try to get Genesis out of their hands. So they go into this nebula, and right now, they're just playing around with Khan. I mean, they know how to maneuver everything. Khan he's out of his element. So we get this really cool space fight. And that's one of the things that I miss most about the old Star Wars with the original trilogy and even the prequel trilogy. We get a lot of fights in space, because with a technology like Star Wars and Star Trek, whether technology visually is dated or not, seeing starships fight is just one of the coolest things in a movie to me. And so that's the thing with Disney's Star Wars, is they've been lacking space fights. And so that's something I'm now appreciating about Star Trek, is just the constant fights in space. Khan never is face to face with Kirk, and they're never having phasers shooting at each other. It's always a captain versus captain thing, and I really think that's very interesting, because to have two opponents who never essentially meet face to face, I think was just really, really cool. And so in this nebula, of course, the Enterprise gets the upper hand, and as Khan's basically defeated, the crew now realize that he's setting Project Genesis off, which is going to create an explosion so big the Enterprise can't get away because warp speed is down. So Spock, to my surprise, he sacrifices himself so that they can get the speed they need to get away from the blast. And in doing so, this kills Spock. And so I don't have a lot of spoilers for these movies, guys. I mean, I saw the with Chris Pine. I've seen that first one, just called Star Trek. And I remember seeing Star Trek Into Darkness, but that was so long ago I don't remember much. And I've never seen the originals until, well, a little over a year ago with Star Trek, the original motion picture, as the box states. And now this one. And so I didn't know Spock dies. So it really took me by surprise. I was shocked. And now I'm more interested than ever to see what happens next. So I'm really interested to see what happens. I'm curious. My interest is piqued. And it's sort of it's a cliffhanger, sort of, because even though Spock's dead, it keeps you wondering what's going to happen next, as it has done for me. So I'm very excited to continue on with this franchise, and I do not plan on waiting over a year to watch the next one, as that's the gap between me seeing the first and second. So I'm definitely going to get to the next one pretty soon. So all in all, I really like this movie. Of course, the new 4K art print, I love the design. These do come with directors and theatrical cuts. I watched the theatrical just because the directors had, it was an extra 3 minutes, so I don't know what's different. I just decided to watch theatrical because. But as many Star Trek fans will point out for you guys, there are so many copies. There's DVD, there's Blu-rays, there's the 4K movies individually, there's 4K sets, there's all sorts of various copies. So because there's so many different copies, this is not an expensive franchise to collect. And so that's why I collected, I believe, the first 6 when they were on sale when I bought them. And so I plan on buying the next few when I catch up to the 6th one. So I'm excited to see these movies. I love this franchise. I'm excited that this is the 200th video. It was, I think, about 14 months ago that I started reviewing movies, and it's the craziest thing in the world because it's become something I'm very passionate about. These videos may not look the fanciest, but it's something I really like doing, and I have fun doing it. And really, at the end of the day, ultimately that's what matters. So thank you guys for sticking with me. I love doing this. I love viewing movies. I love reviewing movies. And I'm excited to share my next video with you guys, as I have a very hot take. And I'm sure I'll die on that hill. But you guys will find out as I soon will review or reveal my thoughts on the new Joker. So I'll leave that there. Thank you guys for sticking with me. And again, I will see you all next time.